City officials insist JonBenet's parents are still cooperating fully, but to many it appears they are traveling whenever and wherever they want to without telling police and answering questions only when it suits them.
And that was a report from January 3rd, 1997. Did you know the coroner, John Meyer, only spent 7 minutes inside the Ramsey home, and that was barely 10 days prior to that news report? And he didn't do some basic routine procedures needed to determine the time of death. That could include either measuring the internal body temperature or taking vitreous fluid from the eye. And by the way, time of death is one of the most important clues when it comes to a homicide investigation.
Nobody has been ruled in or out as suspects.
The former Little Miss Colorado was put to bed by her parents Christmas night, and her body was found in the basement the next day. There was no evidence of a break-in, so police are looking hard at people who knew her.
But there's an additional aspect that the coroner and seemingly everyone else who has studied this case in any detail seems to have missed. It is a large triangular-shaped abrasion immediately below the ligature.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
In the autopsy report, the coroner doesn't seem to speculate on what caused this abrasion, and in fact, very few people do. Detective Smit concentrated a lot on abrasions, but not this one. James Kolar has an image of the abrasion in question on page 56 of the hardcover version of his book Foreign Faction. In this video, we won't be publishing any images of the particular abrasion, but I will put a link to several of those images in the description. Now, very little analysis is given to this abrasion in Foreign Faction, besides in the caption, which cites Dr. Werner Spitz speculating that someone might have initially grabbed JonBenet's shirt collar, and this is what caused the mark. It's known as the Knuckle collar theory. Dr. Werner Smit and others proposed an alternative theory that the mark was not a burn, but a bruise caused by a perpetrator's knuckle during a manual strangulation attempt prior to the use of the ligature. In this scenario, the assailant grabbed the shirt collar, twisting it, which pressed their knuckles and the fabric into the skin. Now, you can have a look for yourself whether you think that that is a burn or a bruise mark. Now, I agree that the bottom of the abrasion corresponds to roughly the size and shape of a knuckle, except that it seems to me that it tapers off in an upwards direction. One might say the hand is twisted. You should look at your own hand if you're imagining grabbing someone's shirt and then twisting it around, twisting the shirt around to face you. And so when you rotate your hand, what you see is that your fingers begin by pointing upwards. And when you rotate your hand down, they are now still pointing upwards, but the fingers are really pointing toward the direction of the chin. But if you look at the image in question, it looks like you're really seeing one finger instead of several. And so I have another suggestion for what could have taken place here. What if someone was confronted with JonBenet struggling to breathe? And please note, this particular injury is regarded as peri-mortem, inflicted while JonBenet was still alive. What if instead of someone trying to manually strangle JonBenet, they were actually trying to save her, trying to get their finger under the ligature in order to try to loosen it, in order to try to save JonBenet? It makes no sense that having tied JonBenet and having placed a ligature around her neck, now when I say tied, I mean tied her hands, that they would then attempt to deliberately strangle her by hand. Well, why do you have the ligatures if you're going to do that? What also doesn't make sense is JonBenet's own efforts to save herself. We would not see these small half-moon incisions made by JonBenet's own fingernails as she attempted to also loosen the ligature. And what that also indicates is that there was a period of time after the ligature tightened and before she was struck in the head that she was conscious, albeit for a short time, and able to do that. To reiterate, what this suggests is that JonBenet wasn't restrained as we've been led to believe, and also did not die instantly or after some extended period of time, but something in between. Thus, what if someone was confronted with JonBenet trying to breathe? She's still alive, but she's in distress, and they saw her trying to loosen the ligature and try to help her, tried hard to insert their own finger underneath it. In other words, was someone trying to save JonBenet? Now, before we test that theory, we must also examine additional possibilities for what might have caused that abrasion. One possibility is that JonBenet died while lying on her stomach and had something pressed against her neck as she expired. Perhaps the corner of a toy train, perhaps the remote control of a VCR, perhaps a piece of Lego or someone's shoe. Another possibility is that the object pressed against JonBenet's neck wasn't a hand at all, wasn't a knuckle, wasn't a finger, but a tool, perhaps even a Swiss Army knife. Some of the blades on a Swiss Army knife are specifically used to untangle knots, and some of them have small little hooks on the end that would be useful and narrower than a finger to get under some sort of tightened cord such as this. The corkscrew is one lever that can be used to pick apart tight knots. The marlin spike is another. And due to the ligature being woven around a gold necklace, we can see that a finger wouldn't easily get underneath a ligature, but one of these tools might. Now, I am going to show a false color image, a zoomed in image, where you can see that the abrasion is not only directly below the ligature, but also directed at it, and further, it terminates at the ligature. Now that we've established the merits of this theory, we need to apply it to the circumstances of this case. Of all the potential suspects, who would be the most likely to want to try to save JonBenet, if that is what this triangular abrasion actually represents? If an intruder committed the crime and the subsequent attack, is it likely he, the person who intended JonBenet to be his victim, also tried to save her? I would say the intruder is the least likely candidate. In a scenario where JonBenet was actually killed, for example, if the ligature was part of a game and JonBenet suddenly scrambled away and stepped on part of the ligature mechanism and inadvertently tightened it, then one can imagine whoever she was with might have tried to intervene and help her. There are also other possibilities. Remember, this injury supposedly occurred while JonBenet was still alive. So the intervention, if that's what it was, occurred while she was alive, struggling, possibly shortly after JonBenet screamed. It's also important to note that if there was an attempt to save JonBenet, it was unsuccessful. We must also try to see the triangular abrasion in the context of other marks, besides the fingernail marks. What if those black marks were caused by electrified train tracks and someone thought of using that as a way to revive JonBenet as well? If so, then we are dealing with a second attempt by someone to revive JonBenet. But if so, who? And why would anyone want to do that?
The parents have hired a private investigator, a media consultant, separate attorneys, and they are offering a $50,000 reward. But late this afternoon, city officials had to admit they are not even certain where JonBenet's parents are at this time.
Well, I'm not going to take it further than that, but I would be interested to know if this is an area you've never thought of before. Let me know in the comments. Also, I'll be sharing with you some very interesting news about a brand new limited series, so look out for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.